Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave and this video is one I wasn't actually planning on making. It's one, to be honest, I didn't particularly want to make, but I kind of just thought I'd take a few minutes to reflect on the news, sad news from earlier this week that we've lost Eddie van Halen. I've seen quite a few videos people putting on YouTube talking about this, and at first I was a little bit reticent to do something because part of me had felt like it was kind of almost like cashing in on some bad news by using it as an excuse to create content. But looking at what other people have been doing, it's valid. A lot of these people are commenting on like current affairs in the music industry, in the guitar community. So I'm certainly not having a pop at anybody for making a video about Eddie. But the more I thought about it, I thought, no, he's one of the greats. He deserves to be talked about. And the more I thought about kind of the influence he'd had on me, how he'd affected my musical experience, my guitar playing, and so on. I thought, yeah, it's worth talking a little bit about him. I mean, I've been playing guitar for a very long time, and certainly I was aware of Eddie van Halen, or Van Halen the band, before I even got into guitar. So he's kind of always been there in my consciousness as a guitar player. And something I've heard one or two people talk about is who are the truly great, truly influential guitarists? Because Eddie van Halen is definitely one of them. And if you're thinking about the guitar Mount Rushmore, who are the four figures that would be on that theoretical mountain? Jimi Hendrix has got to be there. I think Eddie van Halen is the other one who, regardless of your musical tastes or your perspective, you can't fail to recognise the importance of Eddie van Halen. The other two places there probably vary a little bit depending on who you're, who you follow, what your musical preferences are. If you're a rock guitarist, you probably say, Joe Satriani's one of the greats. Or if you're into jazz, you probably say, well, Wes Montgomery's got to be there. Personally, I'm a huge Buckethead fanboy. Maybe I don't want to see him on there, but certainly the two people who've totally redefined guitar, without debate, Jimi Hendrix and Eddie van Halen. There's other great guitarists, but they've always kind of done something a bit better or a little bit a different take on what's been done before, as opposed to completely redefining it and bringing something completely new to the table. The way I like an analogy, I guess the way I'd kind of describe it is, if you think about it in terms of colour, you get lots of guitarists coming along, but all they're doing is they're just bringing different shades of the same thing. So if you think about, say like rock guitar before Jimi Hendrix, you had lots of different shades of green, for example, in the sphere of rock guitar. You had light green, dark green, forest green, mint green, all this sort of stuff. Then Jimi Hendrix came along and suddenly you had bright yellow. It's like you'd never seen yellow. You had no concept of what the colour of yellow was, but suddenly he kind of brought it along. It's not just giving you a different shade of something that's come before, it's a totally different thing. And kind of so it is with Eddie van Halen. There'd been hard rock, heavy rock guitar players before Eddie van Halen, but he just brought something completely different in a way that other guitar players hadn't. And people have kind of followed on from him. They're just doing different shades of Eddie van Halen. They're not bringing a different colour. They're just taking what he's done and evolving it. Certainly one of the things we have to acknowledge Eddie van Halen for, kind of as an innovator, is tapping. Now, I'm not claiming he invented tapping. Some people will say that he did. He didn't. There was tapping going on before Eddie van Halen, even back into classical guitar, people were putting two hands on the fingerboard. But Eddie van Halen did so much to bring it into the mainstream, put a spotlight on it. This is something you could do with a guitar, like a different way of playing the guitar rather than just picking and fretting. And kind of giving something kind of into the public consciousness that other guitar players could pick up on and use. I mean, I remember when I was first learning guitar and getting into more advanced stuff, when I wanted to learn tapping, it was licks like this. Yeah, that sort of thing that kind of came out of Eruption. In any guitar, you could go into any guitar store in the 80s and 90s, and that's what kids were playing and people were playing. And like I say, tapping, just Eddie van Halen kind of put it out there, and so many other guitar players kind of picked it up and took it beyond there, from two fingers on the fingerboard, hands, your right hand behind left, 8 fingers on the fingerboards, the sort of stuff that people like Jennifer Batten, Jeff Watson from Night Ranger used to do. Even like moving into the jazz sphere, people like Stanley Jordan, bringing up to date people like Tosin Abasi. All this two-handed stuff on the fingerboard, it owes so much to Eddie Van Halen as an influence, because he kind of just made people realise, here's a technique, here's something else he can do. So that alone, kind of is establishing Eddie's credentials as being part of that guitar Mount Rushmore. But he did so much more. I was trying to think last night about what kind of influences did I get from Eddie Van Halen. So yeah, I did some of that tapping type of stuff. But one thing I really remember Eddie for back in the day is like whammy bar technique. He did all sorts of stuff with like a regular Strat type trem, but then when the Floyd Rose came out, it kind of gave him a lot more like freedom and flexibility and more range on the trem for what he could do. Now, I'm not claiming to be heavily influenced by Eddie Van Halen. I'm not claiming to be able to like emulate his licks, but certainly there's things that I learned from like Guitar Tab in magazines and tuition videos and so on, using his techniques that I know I still use now. I mean, one thing certainly with a whammy bar is sort of like little like dips and stuff and like really smooth legato type patterns. And dive bombs and all that sort of stuff. That was stuff that I know for a fact I picked up from Eddie Van Halen. And you still hear that sort of stuff in hard rock guitar now, either from guitarists who were influenced by Eddie or guitarists who were influenced by guitarists who were influenced by Eddie Van Halen. The kind of the legacy goes on. And just in terms of shredding, I was watching some Eddie Van Halen like guitar solo stuff on YouTube the other night, and he just as a fast shred type player. He had all the chops. He had a great rhythm technique. He had an awesome sound. He had kind of sound when you really listen to his lead sound, or particularly his rhythm sound, like the big chunky sort of sound he got with chords. It's not something you hear from a lot of other guitar players, but it's so good and so effective. And kind of moving on from that in terms of gear, the idea of you didn't need a wonderful, lovely boutique guitar. You could just get a body, a neck, a humbucker, and just kind of customize. He pretty much invented the Super Strat, and that kind of influences the way people approach guitar. So when you look at all the facets of his playing, all the aspects of what he did, he's leaving behind a huge legacy. So thinking back to my own sort of experience of Van Halen, the first Van Halen I heard was before I played guitar. It was on a local radio station. I remember on Saturday they used to do a hard rock show for a few hours, and the first Van Halen song that I heard was on that radio show, and it was "The Cradle Will Rock" from Women and Children First. And just from like the opening section in there, where Eddie's playing this huge swooshy, sweepy sort of thing with a phaser pedal. It's a sound I probably hadn't heard from a guitar before. Just it's a really solid song. And then when I went out and bought my first Van Halen record, I bought the album. I bought Women and Children First. It had that song on, but there was so much on that album. It wasn't just all in that style. There's some acoustic stuff on there. A very, very versatile band, but you could just, even as a non-guitar player, I could recognise there's some top quality guitar playing from Eddie Van Halen, because even amongst non-guitar players, when I was still at school at the time, listening to this, I remember kind of recognising, and people acknowledged that Eddie Van Halen was a top guitar player. Even if he didn't play guitar, you could recognise that. And I kind of picked up with Van Halen and kind of followed them as a music fan as much as a guitar player. But then as I got into playing guitar, I was aware of Eddie Van Halen and kind of incorporated some of his stuff into my playing and studied his techniques and whatnot. And then when there was that interesting period, sort of late 80s, when David Lee Roth left the band and Sammy Hagar joined, because I'd been a Sammy Hagar fan before I'd been a Van Halen fan, interestingly. And I loved Sammy Hagar. I probably liked Sammy Hagar's music more than I liked Van Halen's. And then when Sammy joined for the 5150 album, it was like the perfect storm. It was like, oh, Van Halen with Eddie. And then Sammy Hagar is just an awesome guitar player in his own right. Great singer, great songwriter. And it just put together a brilliant package. I love 5150. And I've kind of followed their music since, and I'm totally in agreement with the people who say you have to approach them as two separate bands. Van Halen with David Lee Roth and Van Halen with Sammy Hagar are two separate bands. But however, whichever one you prefer, the one underscoring influence is Eddie Van Halen with some amazing sounds, amazing guitar playing. You just can't get away from the fact it's just pure quality, and he leaves a hell of a musical legacy. And I remember, listening to Van Halen before playing guitar. When I got into playing guitar, yeah, he had an influence on me in playing. But one thing I'd completely forgotten about until I was just thinking about it the other day. One of my first proper electric guitars was a Fender Squier Katana, which is kind of a weird looking guitar. It's a bit like a Randy Rhoads V, but the bottom horn was missing. It was more like sort of triangular sort of shape. Google it, you'll see what I mean. It was the one I had. It was frost white with a single humbucker, and eventually I got a Floyd Rose fitted to it. So yeah, there's the Eddie influence. But one thing I kind of forgotten that I did with it was just plain white, and to me it was a good guitar. It was one of my first proper electric guitars. But it wasn't just being white. It wasn't particularly rock and roll. So I got some black and red insulating tape, just like electrician's tape, and just did the stripes on it. It looked different to Eddie's, but it kind of had that Eddie vibe, and yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about it. But yeah, there was a definite Eddie influence there in kind of how I wanted to customize my guitar, because Eddie had shown us you don't have to have pristine off-the-rack guitars. You can do things with them. You can fit Floyd Roses to guitars that didn't previously have Floyd Roses. I think I had a coil split fitted to my humbucker on there as well. And interestingly, something I think I picked up probably as a bad habit, influenced by this, because late 80s, early 90s, there was a big thing for single humbucker guitars, particularly Super Strats, and there was that definite Eddie Van Halen influence, things like the Kramer Pacer, Kramer Focus, and the Beretta, things like that. These Super Strat Kramers with a single humbucker, and the other manufacturers were doing something similar. And I had the single humbucker guitar, and it didn't seem like a shortcoming because all these great rock guitar players were playing single humbucker guitars. But what I didn't appreciate was the importance of having multiple pickups and being able to do pickup switching. Getting a really thick sound off the bridge pickup where you can dig in and kind of cut through with a solo a bit more, or go into something a bit more softer and a bit more rounded at the neck pickup. That for me kind of came later, and sometimes even now I'm a little bit sloppy on doing the right pickup switching. If I'm really getting into a solo, I just think about the playing rather than am I using the right pickup selection. Because in my formative years, pickup selection wasn't a thing, but it's all part of how we develop as guitar players, I guess. So yeah, this is a kind of a bit of a reflective video. So not particularly upbeat one. It's not a video I didn't particularly expect to make or want to make, but I thought it was worth spending a bit of time reflecting on Eddie Van Halen and his influence on me personally and on the wider guitar community. Because guitar players were very heavily influenced, but we learn other players' licks. So there's plenty of people I will have taught who I've learned Eddie Van Halen licks and techniques and so on, incorporated them into my playing. I've shown them to my students, and then they'll kind of use probably adaptations or slight variations of that into their own playing. So it's like father son grandson type of influence. Guitar players are constantly taking influence from other guitar players, whether it's actively sitting down and learning a solo note for note, or studying technique, or just listening to a record. If you're any type of guitar player, you should have a degree of openness in your approach, that if anything that you hear, even if it's subconsciously, it will affect your approach to the guitar. And certainly I can think of guitar players who possibly haven't studied explicitly, I haven't sat down and learned their licks, but I've listened to loads and loads of their records, and I can now and again when I'm playing, and I'm not kind of bigging myself up and saying, oh, I'm as good as so and so, but I can certainly hear bits of their technique or whatever in my playing, because I've picked it up from listening, and subconsciously it's become part of my playing style. So I think we have to acknowledge just how much influence Eddie van Halen has had on us, either directly or through people who've been influenced by him, whether it's just for tapping, whammy bar, shredding, sound, or just general attitude and approach. His influence on guitar is absolutely huge. Like I say, he redefined electric guitar back in the late 70s, early 80s, and we can't underplay his influence. And I think that's why it's kind of important to make a video here and kind of acknowledge him and the stuff that he did. In terms of, just kind of round it off with some acknowledge my favourite records, I think I've got to say Women and Children first, because it was my introduction to Eddie van Halen's playing and Van Halen as a band, just generally an absolutely solid record. I love it. Mind you, I do love 1984. That's definitely another favourite. Then into the Sammy Hagar era, I've got to say 5150. I think it's the best overall album that Van Hagar did. But they've done other albums which were very, very good as well. But say, if I had to pick out personal favourites, yeah, Women and Children first, with probably 1984, maybe Fair Warning, from the David Lee Roth era, and definitely 5150 from the Sammy Hagar era. And I've also got some Van Halen stuff which you probably haven't heard. Long time ago, I used to be in the habit of going to record fairs, back when record fairs were a thing. For the younger ones amongst you, records, black plastic discs, that predated the compact disc. For the very young among you, compact disc, small metallic disc, that predated music streaming. And I used to go to record fairs, and these were really good for picking up slightly obscure stuff, older stuff that the record shops didn't have in stock anymore. Maybe older stuff that had been deleted, and you could pick it up. But also real obscurities and rarities. And I picked up quite a few of those. I'll probably do a separate video about those, because some of them are really quite interesting, a little bit unique. But certainly one record I've got, 12-inch vinyl LP that I got, and it was a Van Halen concert in, I think, Pasadena. It was recorded in 1977, and basically what's on the record is the live concert direct from the mixing console. Remember, the guy who had these records for sale, he had two. He had one which was an audience recording, so you had all the ambient sound from the audience, and you had one which was direct from the mixing desk, and I picked the one that was direct from the mixing desk so I could hear the guitar better. But that's just pure from the mixing desk Van Halen recording. That is awesome as well. But I think I'll probably do another video about these some of these obscure records that I've got. The mixing desk recording of Van Halen, like the rest of these, they're unofficial bootlegs. Some of them are packaged like official records, but it's not an official Van Halen release. So don't go looking for it as an official in the Van Halen back catalogue. It's a very much a bootleg recording, but it's probably worth talking about in another video. So I think I'll do that. Anyway, like I say, I thought I'd make this video just to talk about Eddie van Halen a little bit. I'm sure everyone's got their own memories. If you want to chip in the comment section down there, please do. We're good to have a conversation and kind of remember him. If you don't want to do that, just go away, listen to some Van Halen, or play some Van Halen on the guitar. Play it loud. He's got a legacy that deserves to be celebrated. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video and you want to see other videos that I post on the channel, then like, subscribe, notification bell, all that usual stuff down there. If you've got a question that you want to ask me, whether it's about guitar playing, guitar gear, music theory, anything at all, if you go here, fill in that form, send your question in. That way I'm guaranteed to see it, and I can get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.